Hades and Mulan are shown on the front of the gift set box revealed last week, and they changed everything we know about the game so far. Just enough of their descriptive text was visible to make out what the cards do, and they answered so many questions I had about how to play this game. Before these cards were revealed, no one could really figure out what these pips were on the side of most of the cards or what their use was. Turns out, they're very likely a key component to your win condition. If we look at Hades, King of Olympus, he's an 8-cost Amber card with 6 attack and 7 defense, which is the highest defense we've seen so far, and one of the highest attacks. He carries the traits Floodborne, Villain, King, and Deity, and also is the second card revealed so far with the Shift mechanic. Something to note here is that Stitch is also Amber and Floodborne, so it's really hard to know if this is just a coincidence or if there's a theme going on here, like all Floodborne will have the Shift ability or something along those lines. Another thing to mention is that Stitch and Hades are the only Amber Glimmers revealed so far, and both of their cards don't follow the same layout as the others. For one, the Amber symbol itself doesn't have that hexagon outlining it like the other colors do, and the line across the card that holds the Glimmer traits is black, whereas the other ink cards are colored with their corresponding ink here. I'm not too sure what to make of this myself. I've heard flooding is a term used to describe the process of covering an entire page of canvas quickly with ink or paint, which would line up with the theme of these Floodborne cards being drastically different from the original characters. Their story was flooded with ink, completely changing the narrative. That's what could be happening here with the trait line. The card is being flooded with ink, so instead of it being amber, it's black. I don't know. The most exciting part of this card is actually its sinister plot ability, which reads, this character gets 1 pip for every other villain character you have in play. Now this is huge. This basically tells us that the more pips on your card, the better. For a while I had thought maybe the pips were a bad thing, and when your opponent banished one of your cards, the number of pips on your card were the number of pips they gained for defeating your Glimmer, but this throws that theory out the window. Now we know pips are definitely a good thing, and this card leads me to believe the win con for this game is directly related to the amount of pips you have on your side of the board. Mulan Imperial Soldier equally supports this theory. She's a 5-cost Ruby card with a 4 attack, 5 defense line, giving her the exact same cost and stat line as Jumba Jukiba Renegade Scientist. She carries the traits Storyborn, Hero, and Princess with a skill called Lead by Example, which says during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, your other characters get +1 pip this turn. Like I said, this indicates to me that adding pips to your side of the board is a good thing. Mulan takes a wide approach to gaining pips, where Hades is more vertical. I'm going to go ahead and assume that the win con is met not by who can simply reach a set number of pips first, but rather who can reach a certain number of pips difference from their opponent. Cards like Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, I'll call her Maldrago for short, are what lead me to this assumption. If the goal of the game was to race your opponent to a certain number of pips, Maldrago is a really bad card because she's very expensive and only gains you 2 pips. I mean, sure, she can banish one of your opponent's Glimmers, reducing their amount of pips and slowing them down, but if you're already behind, this doesn't really help you get ahead, and it would make more sense to play a lower card that gave you more pips like Mickey Mouse Brave Little Soldier instead. On the other hand, if the goal of the game is to acquire a certain number of pips difference between you and your opponent, Maldrago immediately becomes a card worthy of being a 9-cost. She becomes a huge swing card, gaining you 2 pips just for playing her, then gaining you even more pips based on the amount of pips on your opponent's card you chose to banish. In my mind, the design for this card makes way more sense in a format of difference. Then again, this is all speculation, and the reality is we still don't have enough information to make any concrete claims. For example, if we look at Elsa and Stitch, both of these cards use a term called Exert. There's nothing we have so far to suggest what this is or what function it serves. The best I can do is look up the definition and find that Exert is synonymous with bring into play, deploy, and use, while it's antonymous with conceal, hide, and rest. This makes me wonder if it's possible for us to bring cards into play face down. That's unlikely if there's an ink cost attributed to the cards, so maybe when you play a card it comes in tapped, for lack of a better word. Maybe Disney Lorcana is following after Yu-Gi-Oh!, where your cards can be in both an attacking position or a defensive one. I don't know. The most telling thing regarding the Exert mechanic is Elsa's freeze ability, which reads, Exert chosen opponent character. If we assume the game is played in turns, meaning on my turn I do all of my actions, and when my turn ends, your turn starts, then you do all of your actions, etc., you have to assume, based off of Elsa's freeze ability, that unexerting doesn't happen at the beginning of your turn, and isn't something you can just undo. Otherwise, this card doesn't make any sense. I personally am not entirely convinced yet that exerting is the same thing as tapping like in Magic the Gathering. I could be looking way too deep into this, But if exerting does equal tapping, I find it interesting they don't use the same symbol we see on Elsa's card when mentioning the exert mechanic on other cards like Stitch. See, something else I noticed about Elsa's freeze ability is the symbol here indicates your card turning clockwise, which from my very limited understanding of Magic is the same direction you tap your card in that game. But if we go back and look at some of the synonyms for exert, being bring into play, deploy, and use, maybe exerting isn't something you do to take a card out of an active position, but instead is used to put a card into an active position. Here's what I'm thinking. In an article posted by Dicebreaker around the D23 Expo, there's this thing Ryan Miller, one of Lorcana's co-designers, says while answering the question, how does Lorcana play? He mentions that the cards represent characters that you've put together from your team that you summon from your Lumineer station, and you send them on quests to gain lore. Now this certainly could have just been Miller using fun Disney talk for battling your opponent, or it could be a really subtle clue into the gameplay mechanics. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a mechanic in the game where you can tap your cards to send them on quests, and if they don't get exerted or banished before they meet the requirements of completing a quest, you get lore signified by the pips on the sides of the cards. Maybe questing and tapping aren't related to each other? I don't know. Something about Lorcana not using a symbol that is supposed to represent an action that we already have a word for next to the actual word on the card for clarity doesn't sit right with me and makes me think we don't have the full scoop on exerting. Regardless, it's all speculation and I could be completely wrong. I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think about the new cards revealed? Do you have a theory about exerting or questing or what the win conditions are? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to throw me a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on all things Lorcana. I've got a lot planned. Most importantly, remember to take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.